Basically, Reina Imaging is a medical device accessory manufacturer. We're designer and manufacturer. We specialize in the a niche within the radiography industry, anything pertaining to do with X-rays, X-ray accessories, related devices, and that's really limited and focused to that. The business got its start in the early 80s. Leo Reina is a former radiographer or an X-ray tech that saw firsthand the damaging effects that techs can have on equipment in the field in the busy course of doing what it is that they do, which is facilitating X-rays in a radiology department. And he came up with the concept of building a protective case for a device called an X-ray cassette. And that's an analog capture device. It uses a piece of film, and it's very similar to a piece of photographic film, except that it's sensitive to X-ray radiation. So back in the day, so you broke a bone or something, you would have an X-ray taken on a piece of film, and then it's processed in a dark room. Now, X-ray cassettes were fairly fragile. The devices that are used with X-ray cassettes, such as something called an X-ray grid, it's a filter, also very fragile, prone to handling damage. So Leo came up with this concept of coming up with a protective case. He developed several of them using different kinds of plastics and materials. And when he finally found one that was a real winner, we went out and we obtained patents. And that's the origins of Reina Imaging back in the early 80s. As the technology changed in our industry, we just changed with the technology. So X-ray cassettes went from analog to digital sometime in the mid 90s. And we already had holders ready to go for digital cassettes. Then the technology took another leap forward around early 2000s with something called DR, which is a more advanced form of digital technology. And by the time our customers were asking us for holders for these things, we already had them ready to go. It's a great success story of us kind of surviving through the ages within this little niche. We built our business first through word of mouth, but then through reputation. And today we work with all the major medical device manufacturers around the world. And for some reason, they're all okay working with us, despite the fact that they normally wouldn't share suppliers and sources like that. So we're this little fish in this ginormous ocean, and we're like that little tiny fish that swims alongside the whales and manages to not get eaten. That's kind of Reina Imaging in a nutshell. Now today, what we do to stay interesting to our large customers is that we don't limit ourselves to just making these protective cases. We also make all sorts of different accessories that work alongside these cases with other forms of radiography, such as radiographs that are taken on long leg and full spine patients or folks that have problems with their spine. We work actually with vets. And we have a product line that is for veterinary use, equine or small animal, or we've even seen our products actually lately in some of these shows that are on National Geographic. We have products in SeaWorld, we have products in Disney World. Pretty much anywhere where an X-ray is taken, there's a good chance you're going to find a product made by Reina Imaging there, protecting the DR panel that's being used. It's an interesting business from the standpoint we've got our hands pretty much everywhere where X-ray exists around the world. I mean, an X-ray is an old technology. It goes back to the mid 1800s, and it really hasn't changed that much in that time. Just the capture medium in which the image is captured has changed, but otherwise it's still the same sort of physics that apply today. And I'd like to tell you a little bit too about what sold me on WithoutWire. Even within these four walls here at Reina Imaging, that continues to be something that gets kicked around upper management. Hey, why did we pick these guys? Why did we go this direction? So what we'll do is we'll just kind of kick those around and tell you why it worked. Because you're right, it isn't an off-the-shelf solution. But I knew that going in. This isn't my first go around with implementing a software solution like this. And I knew that there was going to be some challenges involved, and there has been. It's not necessarily you're not going to be challenged. It's what do you do when you have those challenges? Before we spoke this week, I wasn't sure if we were going to actually have this conversation. We had a minor crisis, actually, and I really put the support team on task to come up with a solution, and they came up with within hours, something I for sure thought was going to take a couple of days for them to fix, and they fixed it within a couple of hours. I mean, they hit it out of the ballpark, actually. Every time there's been a challenge, there has been a solution, and it's been the solution I've asked for. That's an awesome thing. So that was one of the reasons too, by the way, that I signed up with WithoutWire, was based on talking to other customers that have had WithoutWire implemented. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how I came to WithoutWire as a solution for us, and describe the conditions that kind of led up to it. Okay, I'm going to take you back about 5 years. And Reina Imaging has always been kind of a small business, a mom and pop type organization. And I mean that in as a term of endearment, it's my family business. As ownership has started to kind of transition to more of, call it a consultory sort of job role, my own personal role in the company has evolved. My brother also, who works here, his role has evolved. And as a team, we're starting to look at, okay, well, how do we transition this from the founder generation to us? How do we take this business from a mom and pop organization and develop it into something that's a little more professionally structured and run? And we started looking at all the different things that we needed to implement. And one of those things was the inventory management system, which to that point had been completely manual. Around the same time, we started hiring professionals here to help us out at Reina Imaging. We started filling gaps with different types of software. So we looked at our CRM type software, and we implemented Salesforce. We looked at our accounting software, and we upgraded our accounting software. And we looked at our engineering software, and we upgraded that, and we hired engineers. And I started going, okay, well, we've got all the pieces of the puzzle except for the inventory piece. Which direction do we want to go with this? Well, we looked at our other software suites that we had, and a lot of them were web-based. We wanted something that was modern, very much like you might see with Facebook, or you might see with, like I said, with Salesforce, or cloud-based, right? Something that you could access from anywhere, so you have information anywhere. And we weren't interested in hardwiring the entire building, or having a whole bunch of expensive scanners and proprietary things. We wanted something that would be pretty universal in terms of, and intuitive as to how you might navigate the console, or how you might navigate an application. And we called you, and through some initial conversations, we had good contact, good experience with the salesperson at the time, and we asked for references. Now, one of the references around our building is a large restaurant winery chain called Cooper's Hawk. What our salesperson, so without our salesperson did, was they arranged for a tour of the facility, and to meet with the warehouse manager there, and to see and look at the WithoutWire implementation. I was so ridiculously impressed. I couldn't believe how intuitive the software was, and essentially how few people it was necessary to effectively manage the data. They only had one warehouse manager, and the facility was massive. And I guess it was one of many, many, many sites where WithoutWire was implemented. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I'm fairly certain that it was a web of sites there for Cooper's Hawk. So after watching and speaking with the warehouse manager, who, I don't know how to say this, most of the time when you talk to somebody about a piece of software, they'll tell you one story, and then you'll try to read between the lines. And I tried hard to get this guy to read, to try to read between lines. Okay, so what is this not doing for you? And no, I couldn't crack him. I said, look, man, I am not a warehouse manager. I said, I'm a business manager, right? I'm not particularly skilled in any one thing when it comes to IT or management science. Am I going to need a degree to run this thing? He said, no, man, no, not at all, not at all. And he kind of walked me through all the different processes. And I said, well, what if I did need a warehouse manager? And he said, well, Tony, this software is set up so that anybody who has experience in warehouse management is going to be able to figure out not only how to use it, but to implement it, and then use the data inside to make good decisions. I said, so if you really need to go out and hire a warehouse manager, this isn't going to set them off. It's not going to set them. You're not going to set them in the wrong direction. They're going to be able to pick it up and start using it. I said, well, okay. And I expressed the same sort of trepidation to the sales team at WithoutWire. I said, look, guys, we're a little business. We've got 30 employees. Nobody here has a professional degree in warehouse management or management science. I said, so if we implement this, we take the dive in, are you guys really going to be able to support us? Obviously, Cooper's Hawk is happy, but what about Reina Imaging? And I got the assurances that I needed. The experience working with the development team after that point, after we agreed to sign on, was fantastic. Got to work with Jason, I got to work with Mark Patchke, and I have to tell you, those two guys are fantastic. They really understood the requirements and they translated those into goals and expectations. And so when I signed off on the purchase agreement, it was pretty clearly expressed what the environment was going to be like at Reina Imaging and what we wanted to do with the software. And I would tell you that we went officially live in January of 2020. And the phase one implementation, it was rough because of what was going on with the world. And we ended up having to go live, not exactly because we were ready to go live, but because we had to go live. During this time when we agreed as a company that we needed to professionalize the way that we managed everything, including the inventory, we were also expanding our product lines, coming up with new versions of the cases that we sell regularly and all sorts of new accessories. A lot of our items historically have had bills of material that were very small, perhaps 5 or 10 pieces each. And while we had a lot of different variations on that theme, you could manage the inventory manually and kind of get away with it, even though you'd spend a disproportionate amount of man hours doing so. But around the time that we all agreed that, hey, we're going to upgrade our business, well, it turns out that we also started getting into devices that instead of having bills of material with 10 components, it might have bills of material of 50 plus components or 100 plus components and many variations on said accessories. So all sorts of different bills of material and inventories to track. Manually, we quickly stumbled. We stumbled hard, and I found myself and the purchasing team always in a state of being behind, being in the rears in terms of not knowing what to order, when to order it, running out of materials, having all sorts of stock outs. I started doing some calculations on the number of man hours lost in productivity from doing manual counts or not having reliable counts. I mean, because I understand that a lot of companies have an inventory system that doesn't rely on physical paper counts or human beings counting things. And then they upgraded WithoutWire and they achieved some efficiencies there. But for us, I mean, we were kind of going out of the Stone Age into the 21st century type of thing. And so it was a huge meteoric leap, but one that was extremely necessary. We were losing tens of thousands of dollars of productivity per year in just counting inventory. And oh yeah, we weren't doing a particularly great job of it. So the need for something that would allow any human being in the building to check on inventory by simply scanning with a tablet, inventory location, and knowing where we are, having an up to the second inventory report, so we can guesstimate, what, based on demand, how many parts we need to order, so we can keep our purchasing team busy and not spinning their wheels. These were the conditions that led to us not only deciding on an inventory system, but particularly WithoutWire. I want to hit on this. I made it a point that when I purchased WithoutWire that I wanted to make sure that our licensure was such that anybody in the building could have an account and check on the information that they would need to do their jobs. Compare that to some other software suites that are out there. The licensing is prohibitive. You'll have to pick and choose which employees get access to and see the information. For us, most of the employees that work in the warehouse and many of the employees that work in the front office use WithoutWire on a regular basis to check on inventory levels, bills of material, and other sorts of data that the system harvests for us. So you just can't get that with And that's out of the box reports, really. Those are the canned reports and the canned information that does come out of the box and doesn't require a super lot of configuration. Compare that with something that's, say, offered by Microsoft or some of the other companies out there, and you're talking a whole different level of integration, all sorts of expensive, prohibitive licensing, and all that sort of things. I'd like to talk a little bit about the month of implementation, January of 2020, and what we were dealing with, and then what happened. So let's just preface this by saying, I think it was October or November or December of 2019 when we first got the reports out of Wuhan that, we've got this weird disease, emerging disease coming, right? And by January, the writing was on the wall. There was going to be a pandemic, and it affected the lungs. It affected breathing. It was giving people pneumonia. Our holders are used in something called portable X-ray, and they're used quite often to facilitate chest imaging, chest X-rays, which is a primary way to diagnose pneumonia. Again, a big symptom of COVID, it was pneumonia. At least that's what we were told. What happened? Well, right around the start of the new year, when we decided to go live, all of a sudden our sales increased by 500%. We were getting massive orders for our holders, meaning that all of the largest medical device manufacturers in the world that were making these image receptors, these capture mediums for the X-rays, were selling these out, selling them out. Basically, they're selling them all over the world and trying to prepare for the coming pandemic. And they needed these cases, of course, to go around, these protective cases to go around the devices. And so we got inundated with sales. Now, around that same time, too, we were starting to worry, okay, well, are we going to have to go into lockdown, or what's going on? Because, again, our devices are used in the diagnosis or treatment of COVID, we were considered essential workers. Despite us having a relatively small facility and 30 employees, we had to scramble real quick to figure out, okay, how do we keep everyone safe? And how do we keep the production going? Because our customers are not going to accept us saying that we can't produce the holders. We have to produce the holders. So we can't run out of the holders. How are we going to manage all this inventory? And how are we going to make sure that, we can get the product in their hands? Thank God we implemented WithoutWire when we did, and that we went live when we did. We would have been in huge trouble with stock outages and misfilled orders, improperly filled orders, labeling issues, you name it. We would have been set up for disaster had we not had WithoutWire actually operating and running. Because we had to kind of stumble out of the gate a little bit. The plan, of course, was January 2020 to go live, to have training sessions with the staff, have a nice little slow rollout with no pressure. But instead, it was all hands on deck, trial by fire, all sorts of after hours questions and answers calls with the support team, and a real crash course in how this system works. Because I did get a lot of great one-on-one support from the WithoutWire team, we were able to be successful, at least in the initial rollout. And we never had a stock out, thank God. Never had a stock out, never had a misfilled order. Certainly had, plenty of stumbles, but it absolutely saved our butts. We didn't misfill any orders. We kept our customer base happy. And because of that, like I said, they didn't have any reason to go to our competition. And yeah, we were able to do a part in fulfilling a critical medical device. As I mentioned, we make these cases to simply state that they're just cases and they don't play a role is actually not doing our parts justice. We also sell those filters that I was mentioning earlier Those filters are integrated into the holder. So that's a part of the imaging chain. So the medical devices are necessary. So I don't want to suggest that this was, hey, no big deal. You know what? They couldn't sell the holders. Who cares? You sold your cell phone without the cell phone case. Well, that's not entirely true, because in this case, the cell phone case actually contains a medical device that is used to help clean up the image that is taken. So it was critical that we stayed open, that we didn't have misfilled orders, and that we didn't make any mistakes. We are an FDA monitored company, so this system helped us stay on task. And we were able to fulfill all of our orders and keep our customer base happy. So it was a huge deal. The unique application that you guys developed for us pertains to how we label our devices. As I mentioned, we're a medical device manufacturer that sells globally, so we're heavily regulated. So our labels have to have very particular nuances. You guys serialize the products for us, and you create a custom label format that works with our ERP, with our accounting system, actually. Takes that information in, gets the manufacturing information, and then produces the labeling for us. Prior to this application being implemented, we had a legacy system that worked very inconsistently, was prone to errors, very buggy. Since we implemented WithoutWire, when we produce the labels, they work perfectly every single time, completely taking the weight off of our shoulders in terms of worrying about inconsistency with the labels. Labels are right every single time. The data is stored, it's retrievable, retainable, all necessary elements if you're an FDA medical device manufacturer. So we've been thrilled about that. And actually the picking process is really straightforward. We don't worry so much anymore about our quality documentation needing to follow that exactly, because what WithoutWire provides is a guide for us. You can't misfill an order because it's been hard-coded into WithoutWire. It gives you the step-by-step of what to pick and then what to fulfill. There's a lot less guesswork by our manufacturing team and by the order fulfillment team as to whether or not, hey, are we doing this right? Well, yeah, you are. Of course you are. The system's telling you you're doing it right, and it's giving you the step-by-step. Me personally, the biggest takeaway with WithoutWire is the people, okay? It's the people. I've worked with a lot of different IT companies before, and they do a particularly good job of relating to your concerns and then addressing them. You might not always like the answers, right? But they give you a sense of understanding that, hey, they understand where you're coming from. They want to take the time to understand what your needs are, and then they address those needs, man. That's the biggest difference, is they cut right through it and they know, okay, look, this is how we're going to fix it. It makes a huge difference as the people. And you don't get that everywhere. The effect of WOW on the culture and the thought processes of our staff and our employees, it's completely changed the game. Whereas before it was really based on individuals speaking to each other through chains and through links with individual people bringing manual information. Now all the information is available to all, okay? Everyone does their part and reports it to the system, and then the system's really doing all the heavy lifting and all the organization. Now folks want things to go through WOW. They want the inventory managed in WOW. So not all of our inventory lines were placed into WOW immediately. And so we had a mix of stuff that was being processed through WOW and stuff that wasn't. And what we found was that over time, as people got used to using WOW and they saw the benefits of it, they didn't want to process things in the old methods or the old systems. They wanted all to go through one organized, streamlined system that prompts you from step to step what to pick next or what to do next. And they wanted to see that reproducibility that WOW affords your system. So I couldn't tell you one distinct, no pun intended, WOW moment. It was more like a realization that we could do things better. That's Reina Imaging. That's Reina Imaging. We have a pride in what we do and how we do it, which is exactly why, like I said before, we even look at the way that we manage our inventories and ways that we can improve that. WithoutWire was the natural fit for us.